Hey everyone, welcome back to YouthRUs. It's your host Raj, and this is a platform where we discuss all things youth. Today we're going to be talking about educational equity, which is an issue that a lot of people do overlook and oversimplify. But really, for the most part, our futures are often determined by the quality of education that we receive. Which is why it's so important to talk about these roadblocks and these issues that impact our education system. And today's guest is actually a good friend of mine, Bill Tate. And we met at this amazing pre law program at Harvard Student Agencies over last summer. And alongside a few of the other students at the program, we decided to come together to create ReadRise Education, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising youth literacy rates across the US. And Bill is a student leader, literacy advocate, nonprofit founder, and policy researcher whose work is already improving the lives of students across California. And as a co-founder of ReadRise, he's launched a bold literacy campaign that has grown into an initiative spanning 4 U.S. states and 3 countries. And his leadership helped pass Resolution S25-1904 through the Student Senate for California Community Colleges, which influenced policy across 116 colleges and impacted over 2.1 million students. And Bill brings these student perspectives into policymaking through his work with California State Senator Vosalicia Choa, researching legislation, drafting proposals, and supporting public outreach. And also at Victor Valley College, or VVC, he serves as vice president of the Student Business Association, co founding a student run coffee shop promoting business management. And he represents over 30,000 students as a student services senator, advocating for funding in DC and leading reforms on safety, food access, and financial aid. And his impact really does extend beyond campus. He's interned at a top juvenile defense firm where he's managed over 150 cases. He's written national policy with Our National Conversation, authored a children's book on autism, and mentors young athletes as a gymnastics coach. And he really is a leader in his community. So, with all that said, I hope you all enjoyed today's discussion, and let's get right into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to Youth RS. It's your host Raj. I'm here with my good friend Bill. Bill, you want to say hi?
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's been a while since we last like talked, I guess like face to face ish. So I mean, what's going on? What have you been doing?
Yeah, so I think the biggest development, just kind of personally, is coming up this fall, I'll be transferring to Baylor University. I'm really excited about that. I love VVC. Coming into the community college kind of experience, I wasn't excited. Um, it wasn't like my first choice of where I was going to go. It was just kind of out of financial necessity that I went to VVC. But really, I've been so blessed to find really a family here, both with ASB, with some of the activities I participate in. I've been very, very, very fortunate to kind of find my people. I've had the greatest time here.
Yeah, that sounds awesome to hear. Especially that like your transfer is going well. How are you liking college like as a whole? Like, is it different from what you expected or?
It's definitely different. I like it a lot more than high school. I think that one of the great things about college is that your time is yours. So you're not on campus 8 hours a day. I took 16 credits both semesters, and just Mondays and Wednesdays I'm on campus, but that gives me then Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays to work with. And I
Mhm.
think that that's something that I really do like about high school because it gave me the space to work at the law firm. It gave me the space to work with the senator, and it gave me a lot of space to work with ReadRise and all of the things that we do there. So I like overall that adjustment.
Cool, cool. That sounds great. How are you? I guess like what kind of areas of awareness or like advocacy work are you doing specifically right now? Like I know I'm gonna mention some of the stuff you do, but just like in general, what kind of work are you doing?
Sure. Most of almost everything that I do when I talk about these issues and when I go all these places is we're talking about literacy. Literacy is by far the thing that I'm most passionate about. That passion was actually developed, Raj, where you and I met at Harvard. Um, I kind of seeing there the institutions that people came from, and realizing they were not at all like the ones that I grew up in. I went all throughout my life from kindergarten to 12th grade to a Title I school. The literacy rate in my hometown is 35%. But I also coach gymnastics and kind of seeing my athletes, you can see this enormous potential that they have that's often just untapped. And I realized that my athletes can do so much more, and that our education is failing them, our classrooms are failing them, and that they can't fulfill their potential if they're only reading at a rate of 35%. Just like for an example, in my English class, in my 12th grade graduating class, there were two people who passed with proficiency in the literacy exam. I was one of them, and the other one was a kid from Egypt, Thomas, who had moved there only a year prior and had only been speaking English for a year. That's how bad the literacy is in our community. And that's why I got involved with ReadRise. So that's what a lot of the advocacy is about.
Yeah, that sounds like a great reason, I guess, that like your development and like it's just great to hear that there's such a good reason for you to get involved with advocacy work. And like, would you say that this is kind of your like moment of, I don't know, realization of like your spark, like what sparked you to start your advocacy work, or was there something before this that like kind of just led up to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess the spark, like the genesis of all of this for me was, like I said, it was at that program where you and I met. I was sitting, and I won't say her name. I was sitting next to a young lady, and we were all talking about what we were going to do for the summer. So like these kids, some of them are, oh, I'm going to go try out for basketball or football. I'm going to go do an internship. I'm going to go do this. This one girl tells me, oh, I'm going to go to the island. And I was like, you're gonna do what? Like, um, and she explained, she was happy to explain, no, I'm going to my private island. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like my jaw dropped. I've never met anyone from who owns a private island, who's been to a private island even. And she was surprised at my surprise. Like, her jaw had just dropped. She said like, you've never been to a private island, and she was being 100% sincere in that. And this is a girl who she got into the program. She did fantastic in the program. She had a tremendous education growing up. She had great connections. And in that moment, I kind of realized looking around the classroom, I was the only student like myself in that room. So that's like the spark. And then I connected that with my passion for my athletes and thinking, every teacher, every coach, every parent knows that their athlete, their student, their child has that potential, that they can be something great. We all know it, we can all see it. It's very obvious when you work with them. But when you look at kind of the way that things are going in the high desert, the region of California where I grew up in and where I live in, that's not often how it ends out. You have these kids who have tremendous potential, and it just doesn't stick. It ends up in, we have a huge rate of incarceration down here. The rates of single motherhood are much higher than the national and state average. So we have a lot of social issues that are stopping our kids from achieving their full potential. So it was kind of that cocktail of everything that made it click. Like, we've got, I can do a lot as a coach, right? Like, I can teach them their pullover, I can teach them a forward roll. But if I want to make a lasting impact in their lives and help them get to the places where I think they deserve to be, it takes a lot more than just doing the sport. So that's why I got involved with ReadRise and literacy.
Great. Yeah, that sounds really cool. Would you say that this like the problems that you described in your community, or I guess your area, are would you say those problems stem more from like a problem with the education system and like the rules we currently have, or just like how schools and how institutions are implementing that policy or implementing the system we have?
So I think it's kind of hard to diagnose a specific cause
Yeah.
for a giant issue. I know in our community, one of the big things that I talk about a lot when I go to these schools, when I read to the students, when I get a chance to talk one on one to a student or to a parent or to a teacher, one of the things that I really like to focus on is that, at least in our region, being a nerd, reading, like those things are not seen as cool. So a lot of our work has been just kind of changing that language and saying, no, it actually is cool. The coolest thing you can do is equip yourself with knowledge for your future and go out and achieve things that we all know you can, and come back and make our region proud. Another issue is, across the country, the science of reading has become, you know, the standard for reading, except for in California. California, likes to likes to lead in a lot of areas, but this is one that we've fallen behind on. California tried to pass legislation to implement science of reading principles into the curriculum for our students, and it was crushed by the teachers union because of needing additional training. So that's one of the issues. Another one of it is that simply parents are not reading to their students. At home, this is something, my mom is a kindergarten teacher. This is something we talk about a lot. And it's that I can go to as many schools as I want and read one book to them. That's not going to kickstart a lifelong literacy pursuit if mom and dad aren't doing the same thing at home. And my mom feels the same way. She can read 10, 20, 30 books in a school year to them. It does nothing
Yeah.
if mom and dad aren't if mom and dad aren't aligned on that same progress. And that's not to blame them. We all have jobs, we all have things that, sometimes putting food on the table for your kid is more important than reading to your kid, and I get that. So it's just a huge cocktail of factors that one by one we kind of have to break down and then rebuild back up, both culturally, legislatively, and communally.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely, thank you for that. That's like a good explanation of how, there's a lot of different factors that kind of change the course of a specific branch of what am I trying to say? Change the course of how education is affected or implemented all across America. And this is like a good example that you just gave me with your region. And that kind of differs, I guess, from place to place based on like the culture and, as you said, like the science of reading. So I had a question kind of about that. How are you, because I know you do a lot of policy work, so how are you with your policy work kind of working to change those cultural standards, I guess?
Sure. So I think a lot of the work that goes on a policy level is completely and should be completely different from the work we have to do culturally. I think the cultural work is something that I can't do on my own. Um, but the things that we do try to do to help that are we go and we read to students, we give out books, we give speeches across the high desert about, reading is cool, reading is something that is amazing, reading is something that's going to help you lead or get out, go do great things with your life. But legislatively and kind of policy wise, the way that I develop that interest is kind of saying, okay, I've spent a year on these communal aspects of literacy and of trying to make that change in our community, but I'm missing about a third of that. We talk about the at home, we talk about at school, but we're missing another third, and that's the legislation that's
Hmm.
supposed to be supporting all of this, the foundation of it. And when I looked at myself, I was woefully inadequate to understand that. So that's why I started in legislation. That's why I started um, with my resolution with the SSCCC. That's why I started working with Senator Ochoa Bowe, just to try to learn about that legislative process. Right now, I'm working on a project that will be presented to the senator, where we're going to go over the different legislative approaches that can be done to help support communally based education for literacy and the science of reading.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's all really cool work, man. And congrats for that. Um, I just wanted to ask, what is the SSCCC, I think, as you said.
Yeah, so in California community colleges, all of them fit under an umbrella legislative organization that kind of helps us go out and champion the causes for our campuses that we wanted to. So the way that this resolution worked is I went um, to a policy event in Sacramento with my school with VVC. And at that event, we were encouraged to write resolutions that would be presented to the community as a whole. So representatives from every single community college in California are going to be there. They're going to hear those resolutions and then they're going to vote on them. So I chose to write mine about literacy, and about how, even at the community college setting, we can deal with childhood illiteracy. Those two things often are not, I don't think most people, they think kindergarten illiteracy and then community college. Those seem like very opposite ends of the educational spectrum. And in some respects, they are. But what I've kind of noticed through working through at VVC, and all the different leadership things I've done here, is that at VVC, we're receiving a lot of the same students who've gone through that exact same educational process.
Hmm.
So it doesn't make sense to start the same class of students where only two people attained literacy, and then throw them into advanced English and throw them into advanced humanities courses that
Yeah.
they're just not going to have the tools to build up to. So what our resolution focuses on is how we can implement literacy positive approaches in community colleges, because the fact is, in California, at least in my community, community college can be the last chance for a lot of people. It's a hard part. It's something that we don't like to say here on campus. It's one of the negatives. But outside of community college, there are a lot of people who don't have a second chance. Community college is their second, third, last chance.
Hmm.
So it's really on us as leaders on community college campuses to make sure that we're meeting our students where they're at and that we can help them get all the way from A to Z, help teach them those fundamentals of literacy.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really noble cause, and I think something that's really important, especially when we're talking about literacy and educational equity. Something I wanted to ask you specifically was how would you, not necessarily in a complicated way, but how would you kind of define education equity?
I think that educational equity, when I think about it, I think about the, like I said with coaching, the just massive amount of potential that exists and the percentage of that potential that goes to waste. I'll tell you, when I was in fifth grade, I was
Yeah.
friends with a group of five kids. Um, Out of those five kids, two have gotten their girlfriends pregnant in high school. One of them transferred out of state. We have no clue where he is, and two were arrested. That's how that group ended up. But in fifth grade, there was this one particular kid, and I won't say his name. There was a particular kid that I remember who was so smart. This kid was obviously going places. He just had it. Everyone, you can see when somebody has that it factor. This kid had it even in fifth grade. He was charismatic. He was a leader. He was smart. And I hadn't talked to him from fifth grade to about 10th grade. And then one day in 10th grade, the school gets locked down. And everyone, at first, we all think it's a drill. So we're all like hiding under our desks, like kind of playing around, like maybe poking each other, like playing Candy Crush or whatever, watching TikTok. And then somebody texts me and they said, it's that kid. And that was a real, you asked me earlier about turning points. That was a real predicate to the turning point I would later have in Boston, because that kid had it. He could have been something great. That kid, I really think the state lost a future senator in that kid. Um, so when I think about educational equity, I think about stories like that. I think about the what that student could have done in our community and how that was taken away by not having the right family structure, by not having the right support at school, by not having enough adults who believed in him. Um, and when I think about educational equity, the most important thing to me is that we stop this massive line of students that the same story will repeat over and over and over and over and over, just different names, different faces, and different students, but the same story will be true. So when I think about educational equity, I want to stop that progression of that parade of students who are just kind of missing out on all the things that they can do both for themselves and for the community at large.
Yeah, well, that's definitely that's an incredible story, first of all. It really shows how, like, exactly what you just said, that those types of situations can happen really to anyone, and it kind of stems from this like lack of an equal opportunity to education, an equal opportunity to have a successful career, have a successful future. And again, just as you said, yeah, I feel like it's also one that is replicated not just in a specific area, but all across the U.S. because of either because of our education system or just because of our culture in the way we act with education or how we treat education as a concept. But yeah, I feel like you would also agree that this problem of education inequities is definitely something that's commonly misunderstood, right? And definitely oversimplified and overlooked sometimes. when we're looking at uh, like how big of an impact it has on someone's life. I feel like that's definitely something that that is an issue that we have to resolve. And although I'm not really sure how that would be resolved, I feel like you are an ideal example of someone who's working, genuinely working towards a better future. And I just want to commend you on that, first of all. Like, I really respect you for the work you do. And I feel like you are a great example of, you know, change that can be made in our society in treating these types of problems.
Well,
Um,
I appreciate that, but I think that I think that the approach that a lot of people take when they think about trying to implement positive change into a community is often about taking a system from its roots and trying to alter it in some way to build better outcomes. I think that what I've found through doing this is that the best approach is really just to go out there and talk to folks. Just really like go out there, connect with families, connect with students, go read to a class of students. I think that does a whole lot more than trying to understand the complexities of an educational system that can't be changed within, you know, 3, 4 years. The students on the ground right now are going to be they're going to be throttled through the education system no matter what kind of change we want to implement. Now, there's a serious discussion to have about that at a different time, but I think if you want to make real change on the lives of the students who are in the schools now, the best thing you can do is just connect with them, help give them the resources that they need, and kind of take a more on the ground approach as opposed to like pontificating about, the school system at large and trying to make changes systemically before you go on the ground and meet the students.
yeah, so I guess it's also like a call to action, I guess, to the people that are watching this podcast episode. You know, go out in your community, just help out, honestly. Like as Bill just said, that is one of the biggest impacts that you can make in your local community just by being present in it, I guess. Is a good way to look at it. And Bill, I don't want to make like I don't want it to be like too big of a question, but in your opinion, what are some of like the biggest barriers to education equity, I guess, in either your specific community or if you want to talk about the US system, but I guess that's kind of different based on where you are. So, what would you consider a barrier to equity in your area, I guess?
So, when I think about barriers to students fulfilling all of their potential, I think an obvious one is the kind of educational resources that our students have. Now, this, of course, does not mean that the students in really, really lavish places don't deserve that kind of education because they do. But returning to in Boston in that classroom where I kind of looked around and there was no one else from a Title I school, I think that that's a lot of it. I don't think that there's a substantive difference between the kids that were in my English classes in Oak Hills, California, and the students who are in honors, prep schools in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I don't think there's a substantive difference between intelligence, between ability to comprehend, between potential. I think the difference is that children in Cambridge grow up with education, education, and then more education. In the high desert, it's just not the same way. Education is not a cultural priority, and putting your kids into the best school you can is not something that's achievable for a lot of families out here. I think the median income in our region, I haven't looked at the statistics too recently, but the median income in our region is a lot lower than it is even at the state level and surely at the national level. And that plays a big factor into it too. You can't equip your child with the best educational resources the world has to give when you're fighting just to put dinner on the table for that child. Um, so when I think about like large scale kind of equity gaps in education, that's where I return to is how can we, without taking from the students who are doing the right things, how can we help the communities that haven't been so focused on the right things? Because I would love more than anything to, go pursue my degree at Baylor, go out to law school, come back and have a family and be able to trust that my kids would have the same education that they would in Hartford, that they would in Boston, that they would at a Yale prep school type of thing. So that's my goal and that's my hope for education.
Yeah, that's I definitely think that's a you identified like the biggest cause, I guess, for inequities, and I'm sure there's a lot more as well. Is but yeah, yeah. Um, I guess kind of switching gears a bit, talking more about how people like me or you, or even younger, I guess, can go about trying to make an impact in their community. Would you say that currently youth voices are actually being heard when it comes to them speaking up about social issues like education equity? Or do you feel like they are genuinely being considered?
Um, I don't know. I think that depends on who you're talking to. I think actions are always heard though.
Yeah.
Sentiment, it depends on who's listening. There's some elected officials who really passionately care about the voices of their younger constituents, and others who recognize, look, they're not going to show up to vote. They have the lowest propensity to show up in an election, or just for other kind of cultural, social, whatever reasons. Those opinions are not really taken into full account. But what is always taken into account is numbers, facts, data, research, things that you've achieved. Um, so I'd say, I think in our generation specifically, there is a very ideological component to every action we try to take. I think our first impetus as a society, as a young society, is okay, there's a discrepancy. Now, what system caused that discrepancy, and how can I go out and change it? And there's some times where that thought process is very, very good, and it goes out and it does a lot of great things and it creates a lot of good change. But there's also times where you're jumping into the furthest, deepest end of a pool without understanding the beginning. Um, so I think before we tackle like large scale economic policy and we talk about like the governor's executive orders over the state and things like that, I think that for young people the best thing you can do is get involved and do things like just do the thing. Like if you want to raise 1,000 books, go raise 1,000 books. Like that is an action that is something that people can hold on to, versus just kind of talking.
Yeah. So I guess a big takeaway for people listening to this as well is if you do want to make change, as Bill just said, just do it, I guess. Really, there's no, and I completely agree with you on that as well, because I've noticed that people, or I guess I should say youth in my case, that take time to go actually make a physical impact in their community do make a bigger change both physically but then also mentally in policymakers and they're like in the way that they consider certain issues as opposed to just writing not cold emails, just writing emails or writing letters to the policymakers urging them to make changes in the community. And obviously they, as you said as well, have different priorities, so it's not always a guarantee that what you want to change in your community will happen regardless of how big of an issue that may be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think often we kind of just assign motives to, we have this idea generally in society that if somebody has something to gain from a negative result, they must be the person who caused that. So if a politician can go out and get elected on, we're going to raise literacy, well, it must be that politician's fault that literacy is low because he wants, low-hanging fruit for an election. Or the teachers union must want literacy to be low, like that kind of almost conspiratorial thinking. I would say if you want to start something and make change, I would say avoid that. Avoid the big abstract. Just go in and think, what are the actual things that I can do? What are the how many books can I collect? How many petitions can I get signed? What are the actions that I can wake up tomorrow and do that will lend you that credibility? Um, because I mean, I'll say with me, when I started talking about literacy, it's people, um, listen, they, nod their head. They, yeah, that's interesting, but you have to attach some sort of action to that for it to mean something for people, and then give them something to do. Um, Most people do not have the stamina, the time, or the energy to try to tackle um, a government or a leader's policy position they do have time to see if they have any old kids' books and hand them over to you. So you can go give them to some families who might not be able to afford those books. So I'd say really focus everything in on what are the things I can do? What are the concrete, actionable steps I can take that I can put down on paper and say, okay, this is measurable impact that I produced.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I feel like I already know the answer to this next one, but if you had like a piece of advice that you would give to the new generation or just like kids, I guess, who want to get involved but feel intimidated or don't believe in themselves to take on a big issue, what would that piece of advice be on like how to start?
Um, I think for young people, honestly, like there's not much to lose right now. Like you kind of have the wind at your back when you're really young, whether that's middle school, high school, early college. I'm able to do a lot of these things because I don't have a mortgage, a couple kids, and a wife to tend after. I have, different obligations, but I don't have a 14-hour work day at one job. Um, I'd say just go out and actually do the thing. Um, I think if you see yourself as a change maker, as um, somebody who can be an influencer, somebody who can change things in your community, don't just let that be a thought back here in the back of your head. I'd say go out and do things. Go show some evidence of that. Um, Use the skills that you have because we all have skills that when we stack up in our community, maybe to our peers, maybe to our friends, maybe just in general, we have skills that set us apart. Go out and use those skills. um, you mentioned kind of being afraid. I think that in high school, to be completely honest, I started a lot of this when I got into college. I think in high school, I honestly would have been worried about what other people think. um, Now that I'm out, um, no one cares. Like, go out there and do the absolute best that you can do, irrespective of what other people are going to think about you, because none of them matter. The year after you graduate, the opinions of them aren't going to matter, but the results that you have and the things that you've done for your community are permanent. High school's 4 years. You can make some real permanent change, though.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible piece of advice and something that it's also a good place to leave off for this episode. But before we get to like the closing, are there any questions that you might have wished that I asked you?
I think if we have a little bit more time, I'd like to talk kind of about some of the other things that we're involved with. Um, Kind of talk about the college that I go to. I owe a huge um, debt of gratitude to my institution. They've been absolutely great. So I just kind of like to talk about the different avenues for education, and then for I'll tell a personal story here. I'd kind of like to talk about. I wish there was a resource for me when I was kind of searching for something to hook onto and something to find meaning and purpose and fulfillment in and something to go out and be successful and something to satisfy that ambition. And I think we all have that belief inside of us that like I can be great, like I can do it, I want to be great, I want to go out there and do this. um and for me, young in the younger years of high school, that just kind of burned up inside of me and I didn't know how to get it out. So I think it would be cool to kind of talk about the story about in high school, kind of where I was, how I got to now, um, because I think I kind of wish that that story was there when it was me, because I remember distinctly in eighth grade feeling like I was the biggest loser, like that nothing I tried would work, um, that I had this potential but I was throwing it away, and I just had no clue where to start. Um, So I think it would be cool to kind of go over that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, but the floor is yours. I'm just here
Yeah.
to listen.
So in eighth grade, I I had a total of I think 81 class suspensions, in my eighth grade year. I had all F's and D's in all my courses. I did not care to pay attention. I was like a class clown trying to get attention from my peers all the time. I remember distinctly, and it was always kind of a guise to cover up that I'm a nerd and that I was afraid of being perceived as smart. Um, and I remember one day in class, I had not a professor, a teacher, um, who it was Mr. B. He told me, somebody asked what some word meant, and I like whispered it to them, and he was like, "Bill, you know, you're a whole lot smarter than you show, than you allow people to see." Um, and that kind of clicked something for me. It wasn't the start of like some 24-hour rapid change, and then from then on, I was a 4.0 student. But then as a freshman, I get to my high school, Oak Hills High School, and they put me in this freshman focus class. And freshman focus is for the students who statistically are not going to make it to graduation, whether it's a behavioral issue, an academic issue, or both. I remember the first day of class, the teacher got up in front of us and he said, "Out of this room, if you're lucky, if we do a good job, three of you will graduate." In that room, there was 24 students. Um, and at that time, I knew I had potential, and I feel like every other kid in there knows they have potential too. We all know we can be more than we are. Um, and I just felt like such a loser, like I wasn't satisfying the things that I could do. Um, so in that circumstance, I wish that there was someone around, maybe somebody in my position who was older and who had gotten to the places I wanted to go, um, who just kind of said like it's literally just a choice. A lot of people, when you try to go from not doing well academically to going out and making a lot of change, being like the 4.0 student with all the great extracurriculars and all that, the advice everyone gave me and the advice that I totally disagree with, is like slow down, wait. I think in high school, it's okay to take on too much. Like, see what your limits are. Try to do too much. Like, I mean, it's not going to hurt. If there's a club you're interested in, join it. If there's a thing you want to start, go start it. And that's really what helped me is I remember I decided like, all right, I don't like where this is heading. I'm just gonna build myself up and be the person I want to be. So the next year I went from sophomore year 1.5 GPA to then junior year. Um, I did mock trial national history day. I did like uh, research with a teacher. I did all these courses. I did honors college courses. Like I'd never done anything like that before, and I would say just throw yourself into it. Don't be timid. Don't like step in and see, oh, how does this feel? Like dive all the way in. Really, really, really make it your business to be the most successful, the best that you can be. And I think if you do that, you'll be fine and you'll find a way out of wherever it is that you were headed. So out of that group, um, this is actually kind of funny. In June of 2020, I would have been in that classroom. We were in, that's the hybrid days from COVID. I would have been in that classroom in June 2020, where they said only three of us would graduate. In June 2024, I was at Harvard with Raj and with brilliant, brilliant students in a place I would have never expected. So when people say, like, maybe we taper our expectations, don't you dare taper your expectations, especially not in high school. You have an entire life to cut down on yourself, to be the person who just didn't make it. High school is not that time. If you're going to stop, stop when you have a good reason. But don't slow down. Push yourself as hard as you can go and then a little bit further and see where you can end up. Because I think you'll be surprised. Um, yeah, so I just wish that that advice was out there when I was in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, now it is.
Yeah.
So hopefully someone who needs it is gonna hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. And did you want to talk about I think there's a second thing you wanted to talk about, right? Was it the work you do or
Oh, at VVC.
yeah, VVC, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the time community college is really, 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 really underrated. Um, had I started out at my options going into freshman year were study abroad in London, under my institution I'm transferring for, or go to Victor Valley College, which is probably 30 minutes away from my house. And there's a real stigma of like, if you go to community college, that means you're dumb, or that means that you're not going places, or that means that you're a loser. I would say that impression is completely wrong. Going to community college first was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made. It allowed me to meet my people, and it afforded me a lot of opportunities that have really helped me get on when I get to Baylor that I could not have done as a first year at a big institution. Like at community college, the world is in your hands. Literally, you want to go start a new program, boom. People are so excited that there's people with passion and people who have ambition and they want to go further and do things that people will really, really, really bend over backwards to help you. Um, I think if I had started at Baylor or at any of those like bigger schools, I wouldn't have been able to start like the coffee shop. Like you can't just start a business on campus and have a meeting with the president at Baylor. I wouldn't have had made the connections with all of the board of trustee members, all of the deans, all of those people, and have been able to make really, really, really meaningful impact on campus at a bigger institution. Most students don't know the president at their bigger institution. You can't just walk into his office. I wouldn't have had the resources with ASB and things like that. Um, so I would really, 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 really encourage anyone um, who's thinking of that not to think of it as an exclusion on your opportunities. Because now that I'm going into Baylor, I'm qualified for all of those things, and I've made a lot of accomplishments they help the resume, they help the activities you want to get into um, at your institution, and it's just really a fantastic springboard that I could not recommend enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, hopefully someone who's looking for advice on like stuff to do after high school sees this or hears this, I guess, and takes that to heart as well because I know for a fact as well, even in my area, community college is a really great option and definitely something that people who are thinking about it should pursue.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anything else you'd like to add or
No, not that I can think of. I appreciate you having me on. I'm always happy to talk about literacy, always happy to talk about what ReadRise is doing. Um, yeah, just I'm always happy to come on.
yeah, I appreciate you coming too. I mean, you're definitely like some of the stuff you said even just today is inspirational really and again, I have to commend you for just being such an active person in your community and hopefully you can serve as a bit of a role model for people listening to or hearing this podcast and you can inspire some, just do it change. But yeah, I think that's all we have for today. So everyone listening, thank you all for listening or watching and hope you have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.